one of the things that a lot of people may not realize is some of the horror stories that pastors have had to deal with, some of the incredibly ridiculous things. And I want to share a few stories, some of them mine, some of them that have happened to other friends and pastors that I know. The ones that are mine, I'm not going to let you know which ones they are because I want to protect the guilty. But there are a number of crazy things that I know pastors have had to deal with. Some of them we joke about, some of them have kind of passed on into mythology. But it's just things that I don't think a lot of people realize sometimes, some of the situations that pastors find themselves in, especially at a time right now when we're dealing with COVID and there's so many other things. And I'll eventually get to a story here about some of the stuff I've had to deal with that, because it's very stressful. Some of this stuff will really stress pastors out. Simple things like having a board that doesn't work with you. You may not realize that most churches have a board of directors or a group of people that the pastor has to work with. That board may be deacons, it may be elders, it may be other people in the church, it may be people from the larger denomination as a whole, but they all have somebody that they respond to. Well, what happens when that pastor has a board that doesn't want to work with him? And this happens a lot, where the pastor feels that, okay, we need to go do this, we need to reach these people, we need to help these people out there, and the board's going, we don't want to work with them, we don't want to touch them, we don't want them in our church, they're not the kind of people we want. I had a friend of mine that he took over one church. It was a small church, and as he came in and he saw this great need around them, he saw a great opportunity. As he came in and got to know the people in the church after he had accepted the position, he began asking, well, why don't we go out? Why don't we reach some of these people? Why don't we do some of this? And he was told, literally, they're not the kind of people we want in our church. He began to get to know some of the people around town, and letting him know that he was a new pastor, introducing himself, and was repeatedly told, oh yeah, that church, I was told that I'm not the kind of person they want in their church. He actually told me that there was a lady that he saw one evening, one of his elders, one of the people that was considered the most responsible in the church, that as he walked up and had a new visitor that night, this lady actually walked up and said, you don't need to come back. You're not the kind of person we want here. They only had a handful of people anyways. How do you grow a church with that? Trust me, it was not an easy time for my friend there. But yeah, that's one of the things he had to deal with. I had another pastor friend who, after he got appointed to the church and took it over, and he came in and he was working in his office and noticed that something just wasn't quite right. And what's going on? Long story short, my friend found out that his board of elders was running a gambling ring out of the church office, which is wrong on so many levels. And when he realized what was happening and what was going on, he let his people in the district overhead know, and then he had to confront that board. And one of the board members took it so well that he actually threatened to take the pastor around behind the church and beat him. Honest truth, this was not me. This was a friend. And he and his wife tell the story as they travel around. Can you imagine being threatened with physical violence for telling people that they can't do what they've been doing in the church? I had another friend that it was time to remodel the church. I don't know about you, I get tired of things always looking the same. Let's change it up a little bit and move some things. Well, he felt the same way about his church. And they had a nice grand piano that was sitting on one side. Well, he thought, well, let's change it up, let's reorganize it, let's try and set it up to be more efficient. Let's put the piano on the other side of the platform and move the piano. You would have thought he had declared war. How dare you move our piano? And just mean, we're going to deal with you. And so he moved the piano back. He was very creative, though, and this is a true story. I know this one gets passed around as legend. This is true because I knew a guy who did this. He put the piano back on the other side of the platform to make them happy, and then every week he moved it a foot. So every week it gradually migrated its way across the platform. And he said it took about a year, but he eventually got it from one side to the other. He said, I had a few weeks I was preaching with the piano right behind me, but we did it. There is something, we call them in the church the sacred cows, the things that can't be moved. And you can see I've got chairs here now, but when I first came in, we had pews. And the pews at a lot of churches are sacred cows. Don't you touch my pew. My Aunt Bonnie, who died 50 years ago, paid for that pew. My great-grandmommy helped carve that pew. And you end up with this stuff that is sitting in churches that reeks of age and honestly scares people away from coming in. And you can't remodel because they won't go past that. There's so many stories along that lines. I couldn't tell you how many times I've heard friends of mine say, well, I preached this message and the people got mad at me for preaching it because it talked about what they were doing. And it wasn't even necessarily intentional. But one of the things that happens when you are a pastor, you are called to preach sermons against sin. Well, people don't like to hear that what they're doing is sin, and the responses you get sometimes are not real nice. I know pastors that have had things thrown at them while they were preaching because people didn't like it. At one point here, I actually had a lady that anytime that my wife or I were up at the platform or behind the podium saying or doing anything, didn't matter what it was, she pulled out a magazine and very loudly flipped the pages, making it pointedly clear that she was ignoring us. She wasn't reading it. She was turning the pages fast enough. There's no way she could read it. But she wanted to make it clear, I'm not listening to you. Okay, God's seeing your heart. I'm not going to change what I'm preaching because you don't want to hear it. God says to love everybody, whether you want to or not. Yeah, just some of the things. We're finishing up Pastor Appreciation Month. And I'll never forget that we have what's called a sectional meeting where the pastors in my area will get together for my denomination. We'll get together for lunch normally once a month and share stories, fellowship, have a meal, help support each other, because being a pastor a lot of times is a lonely deal. And this one year for October, we started talking about what was the worst pastor appreciation gift you ever got. The one that won the prize that year was a pastor that had asked, he was a new pastor, well, do you guys do anything for pastor appreciation? Do I need to be aware of anything that might be coming up? And he was told by the person he asked, we don't do that pastor appreciation thing here. We don't want to appreciate. Okay, the last part was added in, but it was kind of stated underneath that we don't appreciate our pastor. We don't do that pastor appreciation thing here. I can't imagine having people being so mean that we don't appreciate our pastors. We don't care about them. I mean, it's one thing to live it and be that, but another thing to say it straight out to their face. Oh my goodness. Pastors struggle a lot of times. I know a number of times where people have built up a friendship in the church, gotten close to a family, gotten to know them, and then the family decided that maybe that pastor knew them a little too well, knew about some of the issues they had, and they weren't comfortable going there, and just walk in and, you know what? I'm not going to be here anymore. Sometimes they don't even call. They just quit showing up. As a pastor, it's hard when you lose a family. And especially if the reasoning behind it is, you know us too well. We're too close. We're not comfortable. The standard line you hear a lot is, well, we're not getting fed here. And the weird thing about that line is a lot of times it comes from somebody that is not growing spiritually, and you're kind of going, well, maybe you're not getting fed because you're not listening and following what's being taught, but sometimes that happens. There are legitimate reasons for leaving churches. So don't get me wrong on that, but some of the reasons that we've heard, I have been told, I don't want to come back to your church because you didn't sing the song that I wanted you to sing on the day I wanted you to sing it. We had our music already planned out. We couldn't do this one because we hadn't practiced it. You don't sing this particular song enough. Sorry. Let me share a little bit of insight on this. There's one song, a worship chorus I heard when I was in college that, frankly, I can't stand this song. I don't want to say which one it is because there's probably some of you out there that like the song, but I don't like it. It's just theologically wrong in every way. What it says to do, you shouldn't do. And I'm going to say it anyways. So I went to the enemy's camp and I took back what he stole from me. First off, we don't go into the enemy's camp. We got no reason to do it. There's no spiritual reason to go into the enemy's camp. Second, you took back what he stole from me. He didn't steal anything from you that you didn't give him. So this song is just bad. Never liked the song. I had somebody that actually told me, I won't go to your church if you don't sing that song. I'm sorry, I'm not going to teach bad doctrine so you can enjoy the song you like. Play it on your own time if you really like it. You can play it outside the church. I don't care what you listen to outside. Well, I do a little bit, but I have no way to enforce or influence anything. If you want to play it outside the church and it blesses you, play it. But I'm not going to do it here. Well, you won't play my song. Okay, who is it about? Is it about you or is it about the spiritual atmosphere? I actually had... I have had this happen to me, and I've had other people tell me, I won't go to your church, you preach too much of that God thing. I have been told I'm going to hell because I preach in blue jeans. I've been told I'm going to hell because I have deigned to wear shorts outside. I've been told I'm going to hell because I have 5 tattoos. My tattoos are to line up a radiation camera when I had cancer. What? And people say this to a pastor, let alone to other people. And then you come into this time when we've got COVID. There isn't a pastor alive who's been a pastor during a pandemic like this. We're having to make it up as we go. And so you've got people that, well, you better have services or I'm not coming back to your church. Or you better not have services or I'm not coming back to your church. What? You better require masks or I'm not coming. You better not require masks or I'm not coming. Pastor, you better be preaching what a bunch of lies this all is. Pastor, you better not be preaching about it until, the same thing with politics. Pastor, you better be preaching for this party or for that party or against that party or against that candidate. Guess what, folks? That's not what it's about. We're trying to do what we can to keep everybody safe and also to promote the kingdom of God. But some of the wars that have gone on, here's this crazy thing. It's not about our comfort. It's not about our personal desires and our selfishness and what we want. It's about Him. And I'm going to do what I can to keep my people safe physically and spiritually. But at the same time, I'm also going to preach truth. Am I going to require masks? No, but I'm not going to tell people not to wear them. In fact, I'm going to encourage them because I want people to be safe. Now, if we got to the point where the building was fuller, where we couldn't maintain distancing of at least 10 people, well then yes, I'm going to require masks because I don't want us to be that church where it gets passed on. Right now, as I'm recording this, we're actually closed again for a little bit because my wife may have been exposed. And we don't want to pass it on, so we're back on virtual services again. I know there are states that are completely on virtual services, and people yelling and screaming at those pastors for doing it, and people yelling and screaming if they don't. How about if we realize the kingdom is bigger than us? Let's stop yelling at our pastors. Let's stop abusing them. Let's stop mistreating them. And let's start realizing that a lot of times they're in a thankless job. Pastors are people. They're doing their best. There's a lot of times where we're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but God help me get through this and help me to make the best decisions I can. Let's assist our pastors. Let's encourage them. Let's strengthen them. Let's realize that they get a lot of abuse heaped on them that a lot of people don't realize. We're at a very stressful time where, for many of us, our finances are down, our attendance is down, our participation is down, and we're trying to keep our churches alive. There are going to be churches that don't survive this because the people don't want to work with the pastor and make it happen. I'm wearing this crazy shirt here. It's a character from Doctor Who. And I'm actually wearing it for a reason, because there's a lot of times our people in churches, underneath the skin and the show and the bright, nice, shiny faces we put on, this is what we look like underneath. And if you know anything about the silence, they are a scary group of people that when you look away from them, you forget them. Don't forget. Don't be somebody who's attacking and cutting down your pastor. Live the fruit of the Spirit and encourage them. They need it. They're not going to tell their horror stories to you, but I can guarantee you every pastor out there has them. Give them some encouragement and let them know that you appreciate what they're doing. It'll mean the world to them. Thank you so much for watching. God bless.